What's going on, brother?
Not much, my man. Nice to see you. Nice to see your face, dude.
Hey, man, great to be seen, great to be heard. Thank you for coming on and giving a word.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed watching you the last since we met, since that retreat. It's been really cool. It's it's funny at those retreats how you don't speak for all that time.
Right.
And then you meet and you have a brief day where you're just ecstatic,
Hmm.
sharing your experience, and then we all part
Right.
ways. So this has been awesome to be able to kind of see your face from time to time. The last few days, it's been great.
Yeah, thank you, Luke, for joining us because you joined Joseph and I last week. Last Friday, we had another talk, and that was really cool. I appreciate having you there.
That was unreal. That was such a satisfying moment to passively kind of be a fly on the wall and to hear other people's experience and to kind of be like, oh, I remember that tidbit of that moment. And so that was really unique. That was really cool. I really
Yeah.
appreciated that.
Yeah.
And two, just seeing your faces, just even now, I'm like kind of brought back to that moment. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. That was that shared experience. Yeah, man. How you been?
Yeah, been good, been great. Just been enjoying this time. I've been doing the sits in the rising and been doing the sits in the evening, and I feel like they've been definitely influencing the goings on of my day. And I feel like more productive, more constructive, less destructive, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I feel
Mm-hmm.
like certain habit patterns are starting to fall away. So I'm enjoying, the flow that has started to grow from coming to that course. And of course, we were only first time students, but you had done this. I mean, this wasn't your first rodeo. We'll call it that.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's something I've done a few times before that.
Yeah. Yeah. And exactly, could you say exactly how many times you had actually done a Vipassana retreat?
So 7 attempts, six retreats,
Hmm.
and the one that I left from was actually a 3-day retreat, which they do the 10, and then uh, as an old student, you're then in a position to come and do the 3-day sits. And the retreat before this one was at Lava, because I live close to Lava Hot Springs. I'm in Jackson, Wyoming. You're in Texas, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was a funny experience because I got there, and I'm not sure. I don't want to speak for you, but my experience is usually kind of the first one. I had no idea, so I just kind of went. So I had no clue what was happening.
Wait, when you say you have no idea, what do you mean?
It's a good question. So I worked at a place called Jenny Lake Lodge for years, which is in the national park, in Grand Teton National Park. And it's a really unique living environment because all the employees live right there in cabins. So there's employee cabins, and then there are guest cabins. And I worked there for like a decade, and I loved it for a lot of reasons. But my roommate one year saw that I was kind of going through something, just kind of really wrapped up in my mind, my head, just kind of mulling through stuff. And he said, I went to this meditation retreat. I think it could be beneficial for you. And I was just like instantly uh, compelled to say yes. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. That sounds good. But I didn't look into it at all, like in any way. Like it's funny looking back that I had that perspective to not even kind of Google what I was in. Like, hey, what am I getting? What is Vipassana? What's going on? And yeah, he he just said you'd enjoy it. So I went, and I'll double back to the retreat I left. I'll start with this. Um, got to this retreat, and it was outside of Seattle. And that very first day where you are all meeting, and you are speaking before you take your noble silence kind of oath or whatever. And I bumped into this guy. His name was Andrew, and we were just doing small talk stuff. And I said, "So, how many retreats have you done?" And he said something. He was like, "Oh, this is my fourth attempt." And I was like, "Oh, that's funny. Your attempt." I had just thought that it was going to be a very relaxing, peaceful experience. Just like, oh, I need to get away from stuff and learn to meditate, and that sounds peaceful. And so he kind of elaborated. He's like, "Well, I don't want to go too far into it, but let's just say that these retreats can be difficult for various reasons." And I was like, that was my first inclination where I was like, "Oh shit, what did I do? What did I get myself into?" And then didn't speak with my roommate for whatever reason, and because he was late or something, and we took the oath that night. So I'm in noble silence, and then all of a sudden, my roommate and I are there, and that experience of not speaking for that amount of time. Very shortly, I was like, "Oh, I like my roommate. He's polite and really chill and quiet, and seems like this is going to work out. Like he knows when to take a shower, and I know when to take a shower, and we know when. Somehow we've, in an unspoken way, learned each other's rhythms, and this is good." And it was like day, and his name was Te Ing. He was this older Vietnamese gentleman. So I think it's day 2 or 3 or so, and I was sitting there meditating or trying to focus on my breath, and I started to have the urge to cry, and I didn't really know why. The feeling was kind of gratitude. I think if I'm remembering right, it was kind of a feeling like, oh, this, as it turns out, is going to be really difficult, and now I can see why that guy who I talked to in the beginning kind of mentioned those things. Because I'm sure you saw, once you sit down and you're like, all right, day 1, let's go. Let's just like notice my breath. And then that task over the first, hour or two or few, being able to observe the state of your mind, your thoughts. And you're like, damn, I can't go more than a few seconds here with this very, very simple task. And it kind of blows your mind, It blew my mind. I was just like, wow, there's a lot of things I do in my life that I feel like I've got focus, like playing an instrument or whatever, holding a conversation. And yet, here I am, not able to just do this one tiny task. I'm all over the place. So it was a humbling moment. And I remember kind of feeling a sense of gratitude, like, this is good. This is going to be good. This is going to be hard. And I have this idea that, most things that are worth investigating usually have some difficulty wrapped up into it. It doesn't just get handed to you. And so I'm sitting there trying to meditate or trying to focus on my breath and start to cry. And no one else is, this is a bigger retreat. So like, I don't know, 40, 50 guys on one side, 40, 50 girls on one side. So a lot of people, and it's really silent. And I kind of get up and I excuse myself and I go to the foyer area, because at this retreat, the men and women are separated, but on each side, you kind of go in and you take off your jacket and your shoes, and there's this like foyer area with a water cooler, and everyone has a little plastic cup, and you take the little tape and you write your name on the little plastic cup. So the routine is, and that retreat, you just get locked into these really simple routines. So, take off your shoes, take off your jacket, get a drink, find your cup, drink water, stretch, go in. So in the middle of the or in the middle of the meditation, I kind of stand up and I go and I leave. It must have been further on. It must have been after day 4 when they're kind of like, you need to, or I don't know. It was one of the group sits where you have to stay in. And I just was a new student and hadn't cultivated an appreciation for that. So anyway, left to get a drink of water or whatever. And the assistant followed me out and he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I don't know. I just started. Okay, I can't lie. I'm not getting a drink of water. I am, but the reason I'm leaving is I was crying and just didn't want to disturb anybody or something, you know." And he was like, "Well, you know, this process of learning to meditate, you know, folded into that is going to be learning to sit in an uncomfortable space and not react." So I was like, "Oh yeah, of course. Okay, yeah, I'll come back in. Yeah, thank you, thank you." So I kind of sat back down. I was like, okay, and then it ended. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I was like, all right. So I kind of left, came back for the following meditation. I think that was the morning meditation, and came back in the afternoon. On my cup, my name is Luke. Someone had written a Y at the end. So it says now Lukey. I'm not sure how it was for you, but for me, at least at that very first retreat by day 3 or 4, in terms of the thinking and the, you know, what was coming up and out, I felt like I was on like 10 shots of espresso, just like in terms of just like rapid thoughts. And so I was like, oh, that's kind of messed up. I'm like, Lukey. I was like, oh, someone wrote a Y on my name. I was like, well, and again, this was all probably 5 seconds, but I was just thinking. I was like, well, who would have done that? That's so messed up. I was like, not cool. I was like, here I am at this sacred thing and everyone's taking this oath. And you know what? Actually, I remember 2 nights ago was Halloween. And that one guy from the cafeteria, the eating area, he took the marker and he wrote Happy Halloween on the thing. You're not really supposed to do. Yeah, and he like stomps around in the cafeteria. He's generally a disrespect. No way, it wasn't. I started like point the finger in my mind like it was this, and then I was like, dude, I was like, you know what I'm gonna do at the end of this retreat? I'm just gonna be like, okay, it's no big deal. Nice to meet you. I just want to know everything. Who was it? You know, who? Man, you really got me. You know, you made my mind kind of spin because I was thinking, I don't know what this retreat is, but I'm sure it's going to bring up unprocessed, or at this point, I realize it's going to bring up some unprocessed trauma-based stuff that could come from childhood and stuff. And that was like what everyone called me as a little kid, Lukey. So I was like, I don't know if I want to see this every time I come in here, you know, as a Lukey. And then at the end of the retreat, you come up to me and you're like, hey, you're Lukey, right? And somehow that really bothered me for some reason. I was really wrapped in my head about this situation. So I was like, you know what? This is so silly. I'm just going to rip this Y off. But then I was like, and again, the insanity that I think, or the psychosis that the midst of a retreat can kind of bring you to sometimes, where you're just kind of like heightened moments of bliss where you're like, oh, of course I'm breathing and the universe is breathing. That's so beautiful. But then also you'll kind of eddy out into some other horrible space or something that is perceived as this thought that you're like, oh, that's really bothering me. So somehow this presented as that. And I was just like really using this moment to kind of like, I don't know, to attach to. So I was like, all right, I'll rip the Y off. And I was looking at it, I was like, oh, now whoever's trying to mess with me is going to know that they messed with me and that they got to. I was just so ego driven in that moment. It's funny to look back at. But I ripped off my name and then I wrote Skywalker, which is not my name. Nobody calls me that. But I just thought, I'm at a meditation retreat. I don't want to deal with this. I'm done thinking about this in this 5-second span that seemed to last for 1,000 years. I was like, Skywalker, put it down. I was like, oh, I need to go talk to the teacher about this moment because I'm stupidly wiling out on it. So I go and I speak to the teacher, and he's like, I explain the situation, and he's like, oh, that's interesting. Do you know why someone wrote a Y on the end of your name? And I said, well, I mean, I cried, and someone's maybe being macho or something, and someone's just messing with me. I don't know. I just had this feeling like I was being attacked for some reason. He said, I want to remind you that you took an oath to not lie. Now I'm going to ask you again. He was hardcore. He was a hardcore teacher, but he was like, do you know? And I was like, no. And he said, well, let's just watch it. You know, who knows what it is or what it isn't, you know, sit with it. But he's like, but do you see how that one thing happened? And you've been obviously kind of torturing yourself a bit the last few hours about it. Like, who here is messing with me? You know, and I was like, yeah, okay. Damn, that's a good point. Whatever. So the rest of the retreat kind of happened. Other epiphanies during the retreat. The classic thing where you open your eyes and you're like, that person's not moving. They must be having an easy go of it. I'm the only one that's kind of having back pain. So I get to the end of that first retreat, and I meet up with Andrew, the guy who had three or four attempts. And he's like, you made it. And I was like, you made it. Oh, you know, you're elated in that moment. So you're exchanging stories. Kind of, how was it for you? You know, how was it for you? And he was like, dude, he was tasked with, because it wasn't electronic, or it wasn't kind of built the way ours was, where it just the bells went off on a speaker. Someone physically would go around, so they had to have a volunteer in the beginning. Who wants to volunteer at 4 a.m. to wake up and walk around all the dorms and ring the bell? So he volunteered in the beginning. So I remember being like, oh, he's committed. He just made a push towards the autoton or whatever, you know, the strong determination. He's now tasked himself with this thing to have to ring the bell for everyone. So not only would he have to leave, but he'd have to hand in the bell, which I was impressed by in the moment. That first day, I was like, oh, so sure enough, every morning at 4, I heard that bell and I knew it was him.
Yeah.
I was like, he's still here. He's still here. I assumed it was him. So anyway, yeah, we were exchanging stories, and he's like, yeah, how was it for you? And he was like, man, I tripped out. He was like, by day 3 or 4, I was seeing shadows in the night. I was like, had you told me before, I wouldn't have understood what you mean, but now I know that it can be a very psychedelic experience almost, you know, in a holistic kind of sense. Anyway, I told him the story. I was like, yeah, someone wrote a Y on my cup. And he's like, dude, that's so messed up. And I was like, yeah, you know, the way I look at it now is that was really a gift, because it was just a Y, for crying out loud, on a cup. I mean, what's the big deal? But I got so mad, you know, I was so angry about it. And he was like, yeah, well. And then from my right, I hear, it was me.
Mm.
And it was
Mm.
my roommate, Tae Ing. And we were both like, and I hadn't really talked to Tae Ing yet. This was the first kind of moment, the whole retreat, where I talked to him. And instead of having this moment, I was just so confused. I was like remembering that moment where I was like, at the end of this retreat, when I find out who this is, I'm going to lay into him. And he was like, yeah, because Andrew's like, well, why'd you do that, dude? And he was like, well, in Seattle, my best friend's name is Mike. He had a thick accent, thick Vietnamese accent. And he's like, and I call him Mikey. And I was like, whoa. I was like, are you kidding me? And he was like, yeah. He's like, you know, after a few days, I was just so happy to have a quiet and polite roommate. And it was kind of just an affectionate thing.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, damn. I was like, it kind of blew my mind, because I was thinking, how many people in my life have come at me with something that is affectionate, but for whatever reason, because the wires got crossed or there wasn't communication, I kind of defaulted by being like, this happened, it is attack versus affection. And it kind of blew my mind, you know, because I was like, wow, what a small thing that when having had an opportunity to meditate and quiet down, I could kind of hear all that internal angst that was probably always very present. And so it was after that, and at the end of that retreat too, some guy came up to me. It was like random because there were so many people. Someone was behind me, and it was their first retreat too. You know how they line them up, so it's um, new students to old students to the teacher. He came up. He was like, "Hey man, I just want to shake your hand." I was like, "Why?" He's like, "You were my rock," and I
Yeah.
was like, "I was your rock." I was like, "Why?" He was like, "Every time I open my eyes, there you were, you know, kind of like silently meditating." And I was just like, "Homie, that was the worst, hardest, not worst, but like most difficult climb a mountain Herculean effort, you know, in the 10 days." And again, that other epiphany that you get at these places where having to sit with this illusion that you've painted in your mind about people, you know, oh, you're kind of day 7, you're kind of so tired of exhausted, but also kind of feeling a sense of inspiration. Every so often you open your eyes and you're like, oh yeah, there's the dude in the hoodie up there. You'll kind of form this story about him. And you're like, yeah, that guy's got a real deep voice. He's this, he's that. And then he'll come up to you and be like, hey, my name's Mike. And you're like, whoa, that's not, I painted this crazy picture, you know? And so that was the first retreat. And then after that, you know, they just each have had their very weird moments like that. I wanted to ask you before we went any
Yeah.
further
Yeah.
about the title of your of this. What's
Yeah.
that? What
You
is that about for you?
and thank you for sharing, by the way, thank you for just sharing that experience and like walking us through that experience that illustrated things are not always as they seem, you know? And,
That that apparent level that we see versus kind of the stuff that is far more complicated, and it's maybe more convenient to kind of imagine that it's not. You know, the value of kind of understanding the apparent level of things, but whether you want to deep delve into it or not, there's so much in that ocean below that, you know. And I'm sure that you experienced variations of that, you know, at the retreat that we were at, kind of
definitely.
like painting pictures and then kind of, um, yeah, and then finding out that your intuition in some respect was validating in some ways, to see your intuition was correct in some ways. Like, yeah, I knew I'd vibe with that person, or how pleasant to find out that I was completely wrong about this thing, you
Right.
know.
Right. Right. I remember hearing that there was actually a scene of one of the Game of Thrones shows, like House of Dragons, somebody he was like, what happiness it is to have been wrong.
It's so it's there's you know there's something so pleasant about being wrong, and I
Yeah.
don't know, and I think that that's maybe something you have to cultivate, you know, like an appreciation for, you know, failure as being a teacher, you know, because it's, I don't know, there's something so visceral, and um there's just something about being humbled in a moment that yeah, is very special, because something else grows inside of you when you're right all the time about this and this and this, especially when you come to things like, you know, meditating, where I feel like the longer you do it, you start to have these things where you're like, oh, I'm having a dream that has come true, or these moments of synchronicity, and having a sense of discernment surrounding your intuition, you know, and somehow that being wrong is, I think, a healthy dose for people that have a intuitive side to them, because it's easy for me to kind of just be like, I'm gonna lead into kind of all the, well, what is it that Freud says? Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, you know, like in terms of it not necessarily representing a phallic symbol kind of a thing, which a lot of people will be like, oh, this is every single thing is a sign. And that I love thinking that way too. But the other wing of the bird is nothing is a sign.
Mm.
And it's you that's kind of bringing the meaning to that kind of thing, you know. Something you said, I don't know if you said it or if I read it. I've so been enjoying your podcast, so I want to double back to something about that
Hmm.
after you tell me about the open palm. But
Yeah. Something I said, you said?
yeah, what did you say? You said the only way to be free
Oh,
is for
yeah.
you to be you and for me to be me. And,
Yeah.
and it's so lovely when a grouping of words like that, they can have so much potent energy behind it, can kind of hit you right at the right time. And I've had a lot of really nice synchronous moments with listening to your podcast last few days. And again, what I'm reminded of is when you meditate, you know, what at first kind of looks like psychic behavior is just, I don't know, natural behavior in terms of things syncing up. I want to hear what you have to say about the open palm, but this is making me think of what happened the last few podcasts. You were talking to Victoria
Hmm.
a few days ago, and she was just spouting some stuff that was just like bam, bam, and I was like, man, this is both she and Jerome are just laying these golden eggs. I was like, I've got to get a notebook. This is ridiculous. Got a notebook, and I was kind of writing down, and then she carried on, and then you said something like, take notes or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's funny. I am taking a note. And then yesterday I was listening, it was at Sandra, and then you said something else. Class, or she said, or you said class is always in session. And there was another moment of kind of taking notes. But right before you said that, you guys were speaking, and I was like, I gotta write that down. I grabbed the thing, I was taking notes, and then you guys again said take notes, and I was like, this synchronicity is a funny thing, you know, with people that kind of have a group think potential, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, could you tell me? I've been so curious about the open palm.
Hmm.
What,
Yeah. Yeah. So
what does that
the
mean to you?
go ahead.
What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So the open palm actually came about when I used to be a big gamer. So I was heavy into video games. That was actually my escape. You could call it like my addiction, my unhealthy habit. I was very much immersed in that virtual world.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the video games that I really had the pleasure of playing in my youth was a game called Jade Empire. And it was based off of Eastern philosophy and just a whole lot of ideas like Taoism and Buddhism and just everything mashed into one. But it was a martial arts video game, and they had a lot of sage wisdom and sage advice. And so they split the two ways, like if you were to think it of Star Wars, like the Jedi and the Sith, you know, the light side and the dark side. Well, in this game, Jade Empire, they had the way of the open palm and the way of the closed fist. So
Mm.
if you were the way of the open palm, you were like the paragon. You were like somebody who was projecting good energy, making, you know, making the world a better place, you know, doing positive things for people. And if you were the way of the closed fist, that was the way of discord, you know, versus the way of harmony. You were like the renegade. You were going around, you were terrorizing villages, you were, you know, tearing down structures, you were, you know, just running amok, you know, you were creating havoc for the villagers, for the denizens, you know, of that world. And
Mm-hmm.
so the way of the open palm, harmony, the way of the closed fist, discord, and it was like the two kind of went hand in hand, so to speak. You know, excuse the pun,
Yeah.
but
I like it. I
yeah.
like it.
So
Oh,
I called it the Open Palm Podcast because that's what I wanted to greet the world with an open palm instead of a closed fist, and I felt that
mm-hmm.
a mind was best used if it's open, like a parachute. You know, it doesn't do you any good closed. You jump out of the plane, you know, you want that
Mm.
parachute to be open. So I wanted my mind to be open and just to continue that expansion through these conscious conversations. And that's why I started it, you know, back in July 2018. That's when I started it. So thank you. Thank you for the question.
And I have another question.
Yeah.
Um, how how is it that how do you find people to be on your podcast? Is it all kind of just interactions that you're having and kind of, yeah, how do you do that?
Yeah, it was very organic, you know. There would be so many times where I would come into conversation with someone and it would really just open me up in a brand new way. You know, it's like Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. said, a mind, once expanded by a new idea can never
Mhm.
return to its original dimensions. You know,
Mhm.
that once you have been expanded, once something is known, it cannot be unknown. You know, it's like there's no going back from whence you came.
Mhm.
Kind of like Vipassana. Like Vipassana has opened up a new door for me that I didn't have before, and it's given me a key to unlock other doors, So
Mhm.
when I started having these interactions and these encounters, with these people, I'm like, yo, other people need to hear about this. I shouldn't be the only one to know about this. I want other people to listen in on what you have to say. So I my message on the podcast was letting everyone know, if you have a voice, it already has value. It already is valid.
Mhm.
Allow people to hear your voice, shine your light, and share your story. So yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear that. It's because those retreats offer opportunities to share space with people in silence, which, I find there are many components that are just so unlike our day to day kind of experience, like the level of dedication, the, the thought, you know, once you kind of get out of your head and you're like, wow, all these people are going through whatever it is they're going through, and we're all doing it together. And the fact that there's no speaking, that's all happening in silence. And then kind of having these stories like, I don't know who these poets and musicians and just this group of warriors are yet. And then kind of finding out, like, it's funny, the image I had of you, because I didn't talk to you before, and you had your sandals on. And I had made this story in my mind that I was like, oh, this guy does like all kinds of crazy shit, like cold therapy. In fact, I was like, because it was snow, man, and I was like in boots and a big puffy jacket, and you had your like blanket thing and you and sandals, and I was like, dude, this guy. I was like, this guy is sending it. I was like, man, talk about being able to sit in peace with kind of feeling discomfort. I was like, I've got all these layers and I'm shivering. And I just kind of see you over, kind of like walking here and there. And it didn't even seem like you were flinching about it. It seemed like you were, I'm not sure kind of what you were experiencing on the inside. Like, damn, what did I not bring my shoes? What was I thinking?
Mm-hmm.
But, but I don't know, the joy of kind of painting these pictures and then some of it kind of lining up and some of it kind of being a pleasant surprise after. Um, it's it's so cool because the subject matter of the conversation that happens after the day you break silence is like, I don't know, like I don't know what else to compare it to. You know, it almost feels like you're with a really good friend and you've had this really epic dream, and it's a friend that really cares about listening to the dream. Like, I had this dream last night that this and this, and I'm pretty sure it's profound in this way or that way, and kind of to have this like almost like a group dream or something over 10 days to be like, I went through this, I went through that. Oh, remember on the fourth day when there was this gunshot or something, remember that happened in my first retreat where we were all just kind of peacefully walking around, and we were just in a rural area and someone was hunting, kind of a thing. And it was just, we had the deer walking up to us at the retreat kind of being like, wow, you guys aren't afraid of us in any way. Well, maybe it was a vibe thing or whatever it is, but then a gunshot, and to feel the collective like kind of together. And as we become like a group walking down to this place together, walking away, and we become one organism. I don't know. I'm trying to put all these words to it, but there's just no words. It's funny. I remember growing up with somewhat of a religious family, and I remember thinking, because my grandma used to say, your grandpa, his family used to go to church 2 times a week, on Sunday and then on Wednesday. And I remember growing up being like, yeah, gosh, what zealots or something? That seems very intense, or something, And coming away from these retreats now, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like 10 hours a day, 10 days in a row or so. And then after that, kind of meditating in the morning and in the night, and then as you're sleeping and then coming out of sleep, it just makes me laugh. Like I've become so much more devoted, than some of the things that I thought were over the top when I was younger. Just like, gosh, they went to church 2 times a week. I wonder what I'd thought if I'd hear like, oh, they sit down and they pray for an hour in the morning and an hour at night and all that stuff. But I don't know about you, but that piece of devotion to that type of a thing because it feels difficult. There's a very unique strength and confidence that comes from doing that I'm sure you can find in other meditative practices and other levels of focus with mountain climbing or other types of things where you just have to absolutely commit. But yeah, I find it to be such a joyful thing. One thing at this last retreat that kind of hit me
Mm-hmm.
is, they say to meditate as you're falling asleep, and the first conscious moments to kind of be aware of your breath or sensation. This retreat, I remember kind of waking up at like 3:30 and being like, yeah, I'm not sleeping as much as usual.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a byproduct from getting my REM cycles during the meditation. Okay, so I was like edging, oh, I'm awake, so I'm meditating. Oh, I'm kind of in a dream. Oh, no, I'm awake and meditating. No, I'm in a dream, and kind of riding that line. And I remember kind of being a little upset that I was awake for a second. I was like, oh, don't be, you're awake. It's fine. Just observe it. But then I thought, oh, that's funny what they say, the awake enlightened or the awakened one or whatever it is. And I was like, here I am laying awake, literally awake, like, but I'm not fully awake. I'm like half awake and half in a dream. And somehow being in that state provided this different like landscape to explore in what felt like a slightly more lucid way. Instead of kind of being swept into a dream, it kind of felt like, no, I'm kind of awake and meditating on that edge. And then night after night of kind of doing that and being aware of that kind of process, and that has continued, that has provided such an interesting experience because I haven't had that relationship with dreaming and sleep in that same way. I've kind of crawled into bed and meditated, and I don't know what clicked on this retreat, but somehow the quality of my dreams has shifted to feeling more lucid. And then also, going to bed with like a problem, whatever, about a career or an interpersonal thing, not necessarily consciously trying to think of it, but almost planting the seed and then meditating in and out of sleep, and then waking up, and I've had the feeling like, oh, the obstacles are still there, but somehow I can now see the line through the path of least resistance, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And it's like playing an instrument, right? Where it's like, at first, you're learning to strum a guitar, and you're looking, and it says, down, down, up, up, down, up. And it doesn't feel musical. But bit by bit, you go slow at first, and then eventually it crosses that threshold where it becomes musical. I kind of felt that with the meditation stuff, is that you're going so slow, at first, and it doesn't feel like there's this rhythm, but as slow as hair is growing, it feels like kind of cross this threshold. And if you're journaling and you kind of go back, and it always changes, but if you go back and kind of recount your experiences, I have found that it's beginning to look slightly more musical after a few years, in terms of that ability to scan in a way that kind of feels not quite so like stuck here and there. It comes and it goes, but those moments of being able to kind of do it in what feels like a musical way has presented itself. And so, yeah, I don't know how I didn't see that the first few retreats, but for some reason the seed finally kind of bared that fruit of the importance of dreaming and its relationship to sleep and meditation. You know, there's something about crawling into bed and kind of just like raw dogging sleep, right? Just kind of getting in and being like, I'm just gonna lay here and I shouldn't have said that earlier on that podcast, or tomorrow I got to make sure I do this, and the value of kind of treating sleep as a sacred moment. I hadn't appreciated that up until recently. I work at night, and so it just, by the time I go to sleep, I've passed out, it's felt like, because I'm just so tired, versus mindfully kind of setting bedtime routines and stuff. So for some reason, this retreat kind of gave me the idea that that's important.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And
What
you would say that, like, with that awareness following you into the astral plane, having that awareness as you dream, and all these things, like you said, it took years for your meditations to feel like musical, to get that rhythm, to feel like now you're in harmony.
Mm-hmm. You just hit it on the head. It's funny how you'll hear a song. Well, there's this Beatles song that I heard for years, and I love it. It's getting better all the time, better, better, better. I was always like, that's a pleasant Paul McCartney kind of song, and everything's good. And for years, I hadn't heard the one lyric that John Lennon had put kind of as a backup thing right under. Paul McCartney's going, it's getting better all the time, or whatever. And then John goes, it couldn't get no worse, or it couldn't get much worse. And I was like, and I had heard that for years and somehow just like missed that one lyric. And I was like, oh, damn, that changed the whole context. Like, it's pretty bad right now in the
It
song,
couldn't
apparently.
get much worse.
Yeah, because it's getting better all the time. It couldn't get no worse, or couldn't get much worse. And I was like, oh, I just thought the whole subject matter was it's getting better all the time, everything is good kind of a thing. But then that pepper to the salt in that moment, I'd heard that song for years, but then finally I was like, yeah, I heard it again anew, even though it had been the 1,000th time. And I was like, oh, not sure how I hadn't heard that before. And this happened at this last retreat. So I've been to several, and the first one's always was the most profound, and that's often what I hear from people. And then after that, it's more subtle and more subtle, kind of the epiphanies and the layers. But Goenka said something about like, this is the kindergarten of meditation, and I was like, wow, okay, this is the 6th one where I've heard him say that, but this is the first time I've heard that. This is the first time it's hitting, because I'd had this idea, like, kind of an ego thing, like I've been to a 10-day meditation retreat, and some people would see, the mindfulness crew would kind of see value in that. But a lot of people who I interact with would be like, I could never do that. That's crazy. How could you not speak for that amount of time? That does sound interesting, but damn, I couldn't do that. And and this time hearing about it being the kindergarten of meditation again reminded me of music, where I wouldn't go to a 10-day guitar camp and come away and be a master at guitar. That would be silly, But the value of kind of incorporating meditation into your daily life, and kind of, it's very easy whenever your food's being cooked and you're not lying, stealing, talking, etc. But but carving a space into your life when you have to put up with, all the shit that you have to put up with, whatever it is, the importance of that and the struggle and the forgiveness that, you have to offer yourself in terms of, often you'll eat a donut or something like that. And you're like, oh, I told myself I wouldn't do that. And there's this thing that often clicks where you're like, you know what, I might as well just eat the whole box now because I've ruined the day, versus kind of being like, no, kind of made one misstep. I've kind of gotten lost in a thought and I need to bring myself back to my breath and not have this kind of winner take all attitude around like, oh, I've messed up this thing, so it's done now. Kind of being like, no, appreciating trajectory. And if you've smoked cigarettes, that idea of, okay, so instead of creating a pass fail narrative, think of it more in terms of trajectory and allow some forgiveness in that arena, so that today you smoke 9, tomorrow you'll smoke 8, and kind of your trajectory is leaning one way or the other. And I've kind of, through the different retreats coming back from them, had different levels of success with keeping the meditation up. And I have kind of beat myself up when I haven't kept it up, kind of been like, I'm not doing the work, versus kind of being like, just notice that you're not doing the work, just the same way you just notice that you're not meditating in the moment. And instead of kind of having this idea of, oh, I'm lost in a thought and I shouldn't be doing that, damn it, I'm not meditating, just being like, no, just observe that that's happened, kind of bring it back to your thought, like losing the practice itself and kind of like having an extra level of awareness that way, being like, oh, I've lost the practice for whatever reason. There it's law. I went on vacation and this happened, and kind of having that same equilibrium upon coming back to the practice over and over and starting again without kind of, again, feeling like, our culture is so productive. What did you do today? How'd your podcast go? How was the retreat? What did you learn? It's like everything wants, there's this production kind of a thing, and sometimes allowing yourself to I don't know, get twisted so that you can understand the feeling of becoming untwisted again. And kind of each time you kind of do that over and over, it's as if you're like wringing yourself out. So falling away from the practice, and that sounds counterintuitive, but it's bound to happen at some point where you and I will miss an hour at the end of the day, or in the beginning. Just for whatever reason, you'll get sick or you'll be traveling or something, and having this, again, sense of forgiveness around that, and kind of just being like, it's okay. It's always there to come back to, Anyway, I'm kind of on a tangent about it, but.
No, I love that. I love the teaching of trajectory, because it does remind me of the times when, we fall down or we slip, and we have a recurring pattern, an old pattern comes up, whatever it may be. And you might think like, okay, when you add on the guilt and the shame and the blame game, then you're
Mm-hmm.
going the downward spiral. Whereas you could focus instead on, okay, I'm improving a little bit better every day, or it's getting better all the time, right? It couldn't get nowhere. Yeah. And so now,
Absolutely.
even though it's a spiral, you're spiraling upward,
Mm-hmm.
you're going somewhere else. Yeah.
That motion, keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
Right, going to saying, keep moving, whether it's through, pain or pleasure, and the byproduct seems to be that, you have, it's as if you have a front side, I don't know much about this, so I'm just going to spit fire with it, but it's as if you have this front side conscious, okay, I'll say it this way. At the meditation retreat, when you're sitting there and you're sitting and you're like, I kind of want to move my leg, or I would kind of like to like swallow, gulp, because I've got the saliva building in my mouth, or whatever it is, but you don't do it, but then someone else is kind of like, and you're like, and then all of a sudden it's across, everyone's clearing their throat, and it's kind of going lateral, it's going across this way, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because I remember thinking, okay, I'm up in front, people can see me. I do want to move this thing, but I know that if I move this thing or I make a disturbance, it's going to inform and kind of echo and break everyone's sense of strong determination. So don't do that. Just hold strong kind of a thing. And I thought, oh, this is happening on the outside. But I was like, this is interesting that it feels like it's happening on the inside too. Whereas if we're taking cues from our subconscious in certain ways, I was like, it seems that it's kind of going both ways because I'm still, and up here, the agenda is we have an itch, we want to clear our throat, we want to do something, but we're not doing it. And it's as if that message trickles down to the subconscious, the child or whatever it is, and is like, hey, so when stuff happens up here that's uncomfortable, we're not doing anything. So that's what we're doing. And so it's like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing. And so it's as if there's this dual healing thing that feels like it's going on where it's like, all right, well, I guess if you're not going to react when uncomfortable stuff happens up there, that's what we're not going to react down here when subconscious triggers kind of come to the thing. And then there's this, I don't know, like a feedback loop of stability that starts to kind of resonate and get created where it's like, okay, well, we're not reacting up here. Okay, well, cool. Well, we're not reacting down here. And there's this like solidarity that kind of happens within you where you're like, okay, well, then this is what we're doing. We're not reacting, you know? And anyway, yeah, I'm not sure what that all is, but
Yeah, that's actually what happened to me during the adhitanas, you
Mhm.
know, when we shifted into
Yeah,
adhitana,
yeah,
the sitting of strong determination, you know,
dude,
that's
dude.
what shifted within me, where it was like after a while, my body was like, okay, I guess he's not gonna move, you know, like I'm sending the signal, the throbbing sensation, the pulsing sensations, the piercing sensations, you know, but he's not moving, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess this is what we're doing, you know. So it would move to somewhere else after a while. It might have taken like, you know, it might have felt like 15 to 20 minutes of me just sitting and just sitting, you know, like with that. But it changed, you know, Anicca, Anicca, Anicca.
Mm-hmm.
It was over and over and over again and again, just showing you that everything changes, you know, impermanence. It's not always gonna be like this. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
gonna be like that. You know? Remember when you know, because we had sessions with our instructors.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, Luke, we would go up to
Yeah.
Josh, our instructor, and you know, he would talk about like you know, like is equanimous is, you know, increasing, equanimity is increasing, you know, everything is going well, you know. And I remember he was talking to Tiber, one of our meditation mates in the hall, and you know, first he asked Tiber, you know, how are the sensations? How are the sensations? And Tiber was like, "Oh, it's excruciating. You know, it's terrible. Like, it was unbearable today. I almost couldn't make it. You know, I thought I was gonna die. You know." He was like, "Okay, it's all right. We just want to make sure that we don't attribute, you know, negative connotations or negative qualities to that. You know, that's kind of like a habit pattern of the mind to, you know, to say something is good or something is bad. You know, and so we
Totally.
just want to be careful of that, and you just continue with the practice. You know, but equanimity is improving. Yeah. Okay. Good. Then the next day, he asked the same questions. You know, Tiber, how are the sensations? And Tiber was like, "Oh, today was wonderful. You know, it was bliss. You know, it was amazing. I really got through it. The time just it flew by." He was like, "Okay, you know, that's good. That's good. That we just want to make sure that, you know, we don't get attached to that as well, because this will also change." And I was like, in that moment, you know, it was a moment of clarity for me, just listening in, like this will also change, you
Kind
know?
of mic drop moment. Kind
Yeah.
of
He was,
when
he was
you're. It's so funny. That stuff is so funny because it's like it's so funny the difference between like intellectual understanding and experience, and it's so funny the how can I say it, the it just in a way it doesn't make sense. In a way it makes so much sense, but in a way it's just such a peculiar byproduct that just by observing your pain, you know, it seems to come up and evaporate. And it's as if, you know what it almost reminds me of in this moment? You know, and sometimes interpersonal relationships, there might be a situation where one party wants to vent and they want to, and the other person, for whatever reason, isn't necessarily holding the space because it's uncomfortable and they want to play the role of, well, how do we fix it? And this person is like, well, we can get to fixing it, but first I need to be heard. I need this to be validated. I don't necessarily, or I just want to vent and it doesn't necessarily need to get fixed. You know, it just is, and I just need it to be seen. And it's as if that thing that happens interpersonally where, you know, this pain that comes up in your body as information just wants to be heard. You know, it just wants an opportunity to it just wants to be seen and observed, and weirdly, by not doing anything about it, by not reacting, it's as if you're kind of, again, creating a space, an audience, just to kind of listen, versus kind of be like, well, if there's pain, well, move your arm, because that's how we fix it, you know, kind of a thing. And so it's as if you have this different relationship where you're with yourself through that type of meditation, where you're like, no, I'm going to start to cultivate this dynamic within myself where I'm going to be a better listener to myself, you know, versus kind of trying to have a banter, you know, the stress we feel by, you say this, I say that, and this witty comment to another witty, versus like, just pull all that away and just have this active listening kind of perspective to your, I don't know, is it your inner child with unprocessed kind of things? What is it? It could be, you know, different for each person, but just cultivating this importance surrounding looking and listening to pain and pleasure. And like you say, not necessarily creating this narrative. It's funny because I said to John, I was like, you know, at the very end, you know, we all talk about you're meditating for a half hour, it's fine. By 45 minutes, you're freaking out. You're like, dude, I've definitely been sitting for 2 hours. What's going on here? And then you're sitting there, and then finally the chanting starts, and you're like, thank God, I need out of this. And this is the first time this had happened at a retreat. I was sitting there and somehow like really deep in the zone. I was scanning really nicely or something. Everything was flowing. And then I heard, Anicca. And instead of feeling like, yes, the feeling was no, because I was like, I'm busy here. I'm in the flow. Like, I'm not ready to be done with this kind of a thing. And John was like, dude, I mean, literally, Anicca, like it's done now. You're done. And that feeling that you had where you grasped and were attached. Because my question was asking him about becoming attached to meditation, like attachments.
Okay.
What's the relationship becoming attached to your meditation?
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting thing that he kind of, it was one of those, just keep practicing.
Yeah.
And he didn't quite hand me the answer, but he was like, keep practicing and you'll develop this kind of wisdom surrounding this. But do you see that your reaction in that moment to hearing Anicca was at grasping, you know, instead of being like, we're done now, you know, it's finished, let it be, this is a new moment. You were meditating, well, we're done now, but I was kind of grasping for it. And that was an interesting moment where I was like, oh, I've always kind of had to reach for the meditation and really kind of practice it and have a sense of relief whenever we're done, which again, maybe that was feeding the other wolf. Like maybe I shouldn't be quite so relieved in that way, you know, when I hear Anicca, instead of kind of saying like, no, I want to meditate more, or yes, the meditation is done, just kind of being like, the meditation is done. Like it can be done. I'm neither kind of grasping for it, you know, or trying to run away from it and kind of relieve that it's finished.
Yeah. Yeah. So that whole thing of as it is, you know, as it is.
As it is. And there's something that you did at the very end that, again, it's hard to put to words kind of how you feel after a dream or things like that. But I love music, and I love to play music, and I love to everything about music and it having this vibration quality, and then this meditation kind of speaking to vibrations. It's always kind of felt like a nice crossover. And at the end of the retreat, we're all packing up and saying our goodbyes, exchanging our numbers, and kind of getting our last little stories out. And then all of a sudden, I hear this beautiful flute that, I mean, blowing your mind. There's just the layers, and someone caressing your hand or something like that, and you're like, oh, that's nice. Human contact, just a basic thing. And then the glove comes off, and then all of a sudden the sensation just is heightened. And I had that experience with your flute because we haven't heard music in all that time. We hadn't heard much beyond chanting, and just the resonance of that kind of filling the dorm room, and kind of just the joy of everyone kind of like rushing out like little kids, kind of being like, wow, what is that sound? What's going on with this? Can I try? I don't know. I just felt like I felt like we were just a group of kids in that moment.
Yeah, yeah, we were. I saw y'all come out when I take it.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
I take it everywhere with me, and the whole 10 days I couldn't play. So, when I finally got the opportunity, I saw y'all poking your heads out the rooms like like Scooby and Shaggy. You ever see Scooby Doo? You
Yeah,
know how
yeah,
they be like
yeah.
poking their head like like
do, 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 do. I mean, it was
yeah.
just, I don't know what it is, but whether it's your visual spectrum, whether if maybe you have an inclination towards music or whatever, it's as if that style seems to kind of increase your resolution or the bit rate, or it gives your brain more RAM. All these metaphors that kind of triangulate it, but it's as if, because I remember another retreat coming out and hearing a bird chirp, and I remember thinking, oh, now I'm definitely hearing different chirps within the chirps here. Like I didn't hear it that way before. And I had that experience listening to your flute where I was just like, I could hear the breathiness, not only the note, but the amount that you were kind of tempering how soft and how hard you were kind of blowing it, so as to get a little bit of a husky, whispery kind of tone built into the other tone. And yeah, anyway, it was so nice to be taking such satisfaction from something that was so simple. Um, and, it reminded me that when you do slow down and you offer to yourself a moment of stillness, that just like untwisting the rope, all you have to do is kind of let go. That sounds nice intellectually, but the experience of that is, it brings you to these giddy heights to where, you know, um, say like a psychedelic experience. Maybe you'll eat some mushrooms or whatever it is, and you'll kind of have this epiphany about, again, the universe is breathing and I'm breathing, and it feels very important in the moment. And you write it down, and you might come, or a dream like that, something like that that feels important, and you'll come back and you'll look at it a few days later and you'll say, well, that's cool, but I'm not sure what the context was anymore. Like I kind of lost it. It sounds poetic and beautiful, but it's as if, I don't know what it is about that meditation, but it's as if it offers you that ability to appreciate very simple patterns and hold on to the very nuanced context of why it's important. It's important because everything in the electromagnetic spectrum is kind of going up and down like this, from AM waves all the way to gamma kind of waves. And it's just the amount you know, the AM is farther apart and the gamma is closer together, and everything has this quality of kind of up and down and follows the sine wave, and our breath follows that, and our walking follows that rhythm, and the solar cycle kind of follows that, and everything seems to have this quality of going up and going down. And again, somehow meditating, I think, seems to offer you these contextual pieces that you can take with you after these epiphanies. And of course, they dissolve too, because everything changes, but it seems to allow you to hold on to the context a little bit longer instead of kind of taking the trip or the drug or whatever it could be, or you know, it's as if you're able to hold on to the nuanced piece of what's special about it for longer. I don't know. It seems like. And so I remember coming away from that retreat. I saw you guys at the cafe or whatever. We were just kind of hanging out. And I finally made my way to the hot springs. And I was in the hot pool. And it was super clear. The water was clear. And I could see this reflection of this light post that had these Christmas lights on it. It was perfectly still, perfectly clear. And I was like, that's an accurate representation of this light pole because this is clear. And all of a sudden a gush of wind or a gust of wind came through and it agitated the surface of the water. And then all of a sudden that image became distorted and I couldn't kind of see the light pole. And I was like, this is such a simple thing in this moment, just showing that maybe the surface of this water is like your mind. And when it's still, it can show you kind of an accurate representation of maybe what's happened, a better representation of what's happening on the outside. And all it took was a little wind. And then all of a sudden I couldn't even tell that it was kind of a reflection of a lamppost because it got all kind of jumbled. And like to appreciate something so simple and basic that way, that's something that I've often felt desensitized to, you know, just, oh, that's beautiful and that's cool. And I do see how that's linked, but somehow meditating for me has made very simple things like that have lesson upon lesson upon lesson. That's that guy, Tom Gamble, who sat to my right, who was a longtime meditator. That's what he said as I was leaving. He was like, I was like, hey man, you've been to a lot of these retreats. What's your take? And he was like, it is that, and this sounds cliche, but with a certain state of mind, you can kind of look anywhere and it can kind of provide you these very deep lessons. He's like, as simple as, I don't remember what he said. It's like this tack on this cork board. He was like, decent. I can't remember what he said, but it was super profound in the moment, but I'll let it go. But he was like, the more I've meditated, the more I can take value out of eating an apple and not only fully indulging in the sensation and eating this apple, but all the layers in it, like the quote you said the other day about you can't count the seeds in an apple, or you can't count the apples in a seed. And I don't know about you, but, and I want to ask you kind of as a last thing about when you were at this retreat, did you have any epiphanies that you find it hard to put to words?
Okay. And this was something that actually was away from meditation. So this was something that I realized in the residence area. So in the dormitory, I realized that because it was interesting, you know, I didn't know a lot about my roommate. We didn't speak to each other before we went into the noble silence. But after we came out of the noble silence, I saw him smile for the first time in the dining hall. For the very first time, he smiled at me and he was like, "Hey, Jerome, nice to meet you." You know, like it was like the first time that we had spoken with each other. We'd lived with each other for 10 days, passed by each other, never said a word. And finally, it was like we were meeting each other for the first time. He's like, "How's it going, man? Like, how you doing?" You know, and I realized that, and I knew this before, but I knew it profoundly during our process. Everyone is going through something, you know,
Mm-hmm.
everyone, like everyone is going through something, and to have more compassion, because just like you said before, Luke, where the gentleman was saying, "Hey, you were my rock," you know? And you're like, "What? I was your rock?" Like I was, I was dying in there. Like I was going through everything, and you had no idea how much effect you had on that person
Mm-hmm.
because they were going through something and they looked to you for that guidance in the moment, even though you didn't even know that you were helping them.
Mm-hmm.
You were still impacting and influencing them. So it's like everyone is going through something, and just
Mm-hmm.
to honor that, respect that, understand that, appreciate that, and have compassion and empathy for that fact. So thank you for that question. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's when you, yeah, when you assume everybody's kind of fine and you're the only one that's struggling, it yeah, it kind of robs you of a shared experience, you know. It's kind of like for some reason it reminds me of the idea of like, I got to get connected. I've got to get connected to the universe somehow. And I thought recently, I was like, oh, wait a second. So like, you got to get connected to the universe. So you're like, show me right now, disconnect from the universe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
go ahead, do it. Try it. Try to be separate from the thing. And so that realization that you have been connected the whole time, and that you just, as I was leaving that retreat, I was driving home in the snow after I was soaking in the hot pools. And I heard this Alan Watts kind of uh, something or other podcast, and he was talking about Buddhism. And I thought it was so cool because it was kind of boiling it down to a story. And it was saying, well, there's someone who has a problem, and they're going to go to a teacher who they're going to ask a question. And I might be botching this a little bit, but something like the teacher has something in his hand, a closed fist. And the student's like, well, I want to know what's in there. And the teacher's like, well, do this and do this and do this and keep noticing your sensations or whatever it is. And the student's kind of frustrated. I want to know what's in there. I want to know what's in there. And the student goes through all this kind of up and down, all these questions within themselves. And then finally, at the end of that experience, the teacher is like, well, I'll show you what's in the fist. The student's like, okay. And he's like, there's nothing here. There's nothing in here, you know. But your urge to seek and ask questions has sparked something inside of you in terms of trajectory that now, you're going to continue on, and you've realized that the answer is a question, you know, to some degree, what you mentioned the other day. And anyway, I was driving back from that retreat and I was like, oh yeah, that's amazing. There was nothing there the whole time, but because of your curiosity and you were asking questions along that path, you got to know yourself. You got to know why am I asking these questions, and again, you got to know thyself. And then finally, there's nothing there. And then it was funny because then a few days later, I got tuned into your podcast, and I was like, the open palm. I was like, hell yeah, Jerome. I was like, I love the synchronicity, man. But yeah, dude.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for coming on here, Luke. Thank you for speaking your truth. Thank you for just, giving us these realizations and revelations. Like, I love the way that you do it in story form. You're a storyteller. You're a storyteller, brother. Like, you have it in you. So blessings for just making the time. I heard an alarm go off. So yeah, I heard something over there. It went
Little
off, and
dog, little dog walk in
yeah,
order. Anisha, Anisha.
Anisha. Thank you for the reminders. Thank you.
Man, it's been so nice to see your face and just to chat with you about all that kind of stuff. I appreciate you creating an audience for that. And yeah, dude, I'm excited to watch your next show.
Awesome, brother. Well, as you told me and Sam, man, as it is, you know.
As it is, brother. As it is, man.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been an honor. I'll see you when I see you,
All
man.
right. All right, brother. Beautiful.